Welcome back to another episode of Dying Out Loud, the podcast where conversations happen in the moment. Today's episode highlights the transformational impact of leadership grounded in trust, in investment, and in compassion. Kevin and I are going to explore our journey from coach to employee to manager and team member. We're going to talk about lessons learned along the way and the profound influence of a leader who invests in his people, not just professionally, but also personally. Kevin Doyle is my guest today. Welcome, Kevin, to the show.
Thank you for having me, Kris.
This is exciting.
It
I'm
is
glad
exciting.
to have you here. I think some of the things that we're going to talk about today, you're probably familiar with. You may have heard some of it, but I think by the end of this episode, I'll probably share a couple of things with you that you might be hearing for the first time today. And that's the reason that I wanted to make sure that I connected with you in this way. So I'm excited to chat with you.
I'm excited to be a part of this.
Awesome. So I thought we might start off with when we first met, actually, which was about 3.5-ish years ago,
Yeah,
and was just curious if you remember the first meeting that we had.
I'm probably
Not
gonna
to
get
put
this
you on
wrong.
the spot.
Yeah, no, so you joined April. And so the first time we would have met would have been during like a welcome chat, which is such like a full circle thing, because that's what you do now so often. Um, and then we would have worked on goals over your first 3 months,
Yep,
way back
that's
when.
exactly right. We met during a regularly scheduled welcome chat,
Yeah.
and then ended up having two conversations about goals and objectives after that. And I remember during that time period, I actually ended up needing to reschedule, I think, my second conversation with you a couple of times. And I was extremely stressed out about that because I'd only been with the company for a couple of months. And here was, the director of a domain who was trying to, help me help myself really. And my schedule was so full of meetings at the time that I just kept thinking, gosh, this looks horrible to reschedule, not once, but twice. And I think I even shared that with you whenever we actually finally did connect about those goals and objectives, just, how upset I was that I had to reschedule twice. And I remember in that moment you kind of set me at ease, and I think that conversation actually set the stage for how I interact with, with our G's even today. And, just acknowledging the fact that they are busy, that, you know, we will make time for this as their time allows, and really kind of setting the stage just for how I interact with other people. So I know in that moment you set my mind at ease and also kind of, laid the framework for, how I would eventually start working with people myself. So I was very appreciative of that.
I That's good to hear. I do think that people get stressed out about it, but at the end of the day, this is time for you, so we can work around your schedule.
Love that.
Yeah.
When you think about those early coaching conversations, obviously we weren't working together at that time. I'm curious if there was anything that stood out to you in those early coaching conversations or the early interactions that we had that whenever we did start working together, that they may have allowed you the opportunity to, to help me get to where I needed to be faster, or if you had any like inclinations of, what you were getting whenever I joined your team eventually.
That's so interesting. Um, I guess those are two different questions because when people join, at that point we were people joining all the time. Like we think back to the cohort that you joined with that first welcome chat. There was probably like what 5+ people that week that we
Easily.
had. Um, so I think at the beginning, one of the things that I look for in those initial conversations is, are people showing up? Are they motivated? I don't think I ever had that worry with you. Just the anecdote you just shared, showing up to a rescheduled meeting, not wanting to waste my time and feeling terrible that you had done that showed me that you were in it. And so I didn't really have any concerns about you because you knew this was important for you and you made sure that I knew that. And so that's an easy conversation to have.
Definitely.
the follow up to that is like thinking about when you joined the team, you had definitely made a name for yourself. It was like just over a year later, you were working with people that I worked very close with. So someone who was very impactful for me when I first joined Yale, Leo, who you were reporting into, like we were close, very aware of you, what you had done, what you were going through. Yeah.
I think a lot about those days. You mentioned Leo, and I am having a conversation with Leo in a couple of weeks. So I will get to share with him my thoughts as well. But, I think Leo did such a great job of really setting the stage for me, in my desire to come back to work and not really being sure where I would land, just knowing that I did not think that my chemo schedule was going to allow me to be the client partner that I had been
Mm-hmm.
really for the full length of my professional career. And I think everything that happened in those moments, I don't know if anyone really realizes like the impact or the weight that all of those early moments had on me personally. The sheer fact that, Leo had identified that I was a person that, we wanted to make sure that we held on to at Gale, and really kind of having those conversations with Brad and with our head of HR at the time, and then eventually with you and with Jesse, all of those things, and the way that you all reacted not only to those messages, but the way that you all just embraced me as a human. And I that came with a ton, because I think most people have figured out by now, if they've been listening to these episodes, I'm a very outspoken person, very transparent. And being in that environment that we are in every day, where there is such an intense level of collaborative spirit that is required to be successful, I felt like complete transparency was ultimately the best way to lead. And I think that is still, to this day, I try to embody that not only with myself, but I also encourage people to show up authentically. And in doing that, for other people, I realized the magnitude of what that did for me personally as well. And I think that is something that I have carried with me every single day, because it really helps empower me to find the joyful moments instead of latching on to the one or two things that I could latch on to that might be negative, and I could get caught up in that. So the value that you all gave to me and the way that you embraced me in those early days truly had a long lasting impression. And I don't think I even fully realized, the magnitude of it even in this day. But the more I spend time with people, the more I spend talking to people, and the more I start sharing these messages with people, I think the magnitude, the impact of that just becomes more and more real to me. And it's truly something that, when I look at that whole entire experience, it would have been really easy to say, we hired you to do this job, so we're going to have to part ways because you can't do this job anymore. And I got the opportunity to learn something new. I got the opportunity to hone in on skills that I hadn't spent enough time on. And I really think that you all helped me find what my works, what my work and my life calling was meant to be. And that in and of itself is probably one of my life's biggest rewards. So I definitely thank you for the part that you played in that.
Oh my gosh. You say me, but ultimately, this came to me. And how you approached that whole situation, you talked about a few of the things, right? Like showing up authentically, being transparent. You were essentially a remote employee at that point, right? You had helped Jesse with some training stuff, but to learn an entire new skill set, how to operate, build relationships, and then start impacting people to the level that you did, unless you were transparent, unless you were authentic, and unless you were all in, that wouldn't have happened. So, as much as, sure, like this was a space that I was already operating in, you did this. It was easy on my end because you were putting all the work in.
Well, I appreciate that. But I do, just even listening to you talk, something popped back into my mind. And it also could be because out of the corner of my eye, I see the textbook sitting on my bookshelf. You and I actually ended up going through, I'd say, probably about 80-ish%
We made some progress,
of
yeah.
a college level textbook, and it was about industrial psychology.
Yes.
Um, and I will say, in my life, I think I shared this with you. I've never read a textbook in my life until that textbook. And I actually read that textbook from the beginning to the end. It's marked up. I have a ton of colored flags throughout that book. I think I honestly applied myself more to the reading of that book, really understanding and applying what I learned in that textbook. And then also, we had so many one-on-one discussions about that textbook. You literally carved out a chunk of a year where we were actually talking about, organizational industrial psychology and all of the things that would apply to coaching, to training, to development, and really just leaning into what organizational development means in the world and also how it translates into Gale. So I thought that was a such an interesting thing. And as I look back through like my relationships with all of the folks that I've been lucky enough to work for on their teams, I don't think anyone has ever made that kind of investment in me. And that was above and beyond, right? Like that isn't something domain leads in our organization are not teaching people this type of skill set. And I know it was a special or an interesting dynamic, but the sheer level of knowledge that I got from those interactions that we had and the discussion of those concepts, I mean, it really kind of fueled my fire for the knowledge that I was going to start looking to gain that next
Hmm.
year when I spent really a year working on, HR side certifications and trying to really understand how I could bridge the knowledge that I'd had for the last 3 decades into our current world. So thank you for taking that time and energy and really giving me more in that time together than I probably got in all 7 years that it took me to finish college.
I
Oh,
I racked
geez.
my brain at the time to figure out what was the best way to bring you into the fold because at that point there was myself, Tristan, and Rebecca, all of who came from like an IO psych background, and you were joining the team, and I was like, how do I get Kris to a spot where he is a part of the conversations? Because we're gonna talk shop, and I don't want him to feel left out. And I wasn't sure how the textbook thing was gonna go. It really would have gone nowhere if you hadn't put the work in. Like we were meeting once a week to talk about a chapter, so it was like a college class.
It was. And I loved every minute of it. And I don't know if it was because it brought me back to that time of my life or if it was the fact that I was so hungry to have all that
Mhm.
knowledge. But whether it was in those instances or whether it was in the teaching moments that we all collectively, Rebecca, Tristan, you, myself, that we engaged in whenever we were all connected, I learned so much from all three of you in regards to that. And oftentimes I don't think we find ourselves in a situation in our careers where there's someone that might have relevant adjacent experience but
Mhm.
perhaps not the level of experience that they need for a particular domain. There's not a lot of opportunity like that to interact in that way, but the way that all three of you showed up and the knowledge that you shared, the feedback that you shared, I mean, it's really been like a major part of the transformation that I've had in the last 3 years. And I still haven't reached quite what I'm striving for, probably because I haven't really figured out what it is, but I know
Yeah.
there's something more that I want to learn and do. And I'm going to keep pushing towards that until I can't push towards it anymore. But that was absolutely like one of the largest parts of my life transformation, I think, in the last 3 years. And it was a huge, huge benefit for me in all the ways because it ended up being a motivating factor for why I wanted to be successful was all of the great things that I was learning and the ability to apply them.
Okay. I'm glad that how everything kind of shook out, Kris.
Yeah, I I think I definitely have always been like a firm believer that everything happens for a reason. I would never in a million years have guessed that all of this was kind of leading to here, but
Yeah.
I'm very, very thankful that it did. What would you say when you look at like our interaction and
Yeah.
specifically your role, Kevin, as my manager, what advice would you have for other leaders who are supporting people through any one of life's challenges, including this one, dealing with a stage 4 cancer or a terminal illness?
In what regard? Keeping them engaged, helping them learn, like
Yeah, I think
sometimes just
all of
showing
that. I
up.
think engagement is so much of what we focus on at work.
Yeah.
Maybe let's just focus on keeping people engaged and,
Yeah.
in the midst of all of the things that they have going on.
One of the big things that I think people miss is or maybe have a misconception about is like the idea of motivation. I can't motivate you. I can't motivate anybody, but I can help you find your motivation. When it comes to how we work, I think there was a light switch moment where we identified what your superpower was. Do you remember what it was?
Yeah, it's relationship building.
Yeah, because you do it so easily, so naturally, and it's something, a skill that you've honed. So rather than try to put you in an environment where you are now leading something you don't have the context for, you're leading something that you're really good at, and that's going to build that engagement. It's going to build that motivation. You're going to have success. You're going to have impact. And that was like step one. And then we build on that. That was huge because you didn't need me. You were light years ahead of me with regard to that. All I needed to do was make sure that the training was structured in an appropriate way, and then you ran with it and killed it. So that's big. So identify what they're good at, build on strength, build on passion, build on excitement. I think we are in a lucky space where what you are really good at really lends itself to what we were trying to accomplish. Yeah, but again, I think that's one of the formative things that comes to mind for me.
I love that. I think it is great that you talked about that superpower as well, because when I think about relationship building as a superpower, really once you said that, it sort of became an aha. But you were the first person I think that really said, your strength is really building relationships with people. And we should explore that some more. And I don't even think I really dug into it as much prior to that. I mean, I've always known that building a relationship with a client and with the account team and then with the larger list of folks that touch that business, I've always tried to build authentic relationships with those people and to really encourage them to do the same, because the more that we know and understand each other, the better that we can work together and therefore produce better work as a result. But when you said that, like, let's talk more about this strength that you have here. I really kind of leaned into that. And I think that was maybe like it was almost a permission that I granted myself at that point in time. And I was glad that I did, because I think the more I think about the way that I approach my relationships with folks and trying to establish an understanding, that coupled with all of the coaching education that I've had in the last couple of years has really, I think, almost made this even more of a power once I was able to acknowledge that, yeah, I do understand even the psychology of relationships. And that to me, I think maybe it might have been something that I had been searching for a very long time, because I've always been a very generalist. Like, when you grow up in advertising during the time of life that I grew up in advertising, when I started, it just finished school. I mean, there wasn't this online digital space for all of this digital advertising. We were still talking to people about traditional television commercials and newspaper advertising. Newspaper, that is, I spent so much time in newspaper ads, and everything has evolved so much from then.
Mhm.
Even in like the wildest fiction book that I had read, I don't think that I ever realized that there would actually be a day where I personally could use something like AI to help with a task that I'm doing for work. And it is here. But that evolution has been such a really interesting thing to live through and witness. But it also has kind of given me this place where I had to learn about a bunch of different things and really didn't ever feel like I developed expertise in it. But being an expert in building relationships is something that I think I value much more than mastering how AI can work for me, because I think the relationship is at the heart of everything that we do in
Yes.
our industry and certainly in our roles.
And the things you touched on, like trust, authenticity, which are all important for relationships, those are things you mentioned at the beginning of the episode, right? Like it's fundamental in terms of how you just approach people. You
Absolutely.
you brought up AI and your relationship with that and how you dove headfirst into that space and that was something new. And the fact you've been able to pick it up and really leverage that as an expert, not just on our team or like the people team broadly, but you're seen as an expert across the org now and seeing you produce some amazing insights that we've been able to get buy-in from senior leaders is really exciting.
It's that has been exciting for me as well. It has definitely been. It feels like, quite honestly, with the dark cloud of cancer hanging over me,
Yeah.
it feels like all of these career things have been so powerfully motivating and really like medicinal. I, I honestly I have no other way to explain it. I've been basically on the same treatment regimen for almost 3 years. I've just done the first major shift in that in the last couple of weeks, but we've been pretty steadily seeing like little bits of growth and spreading, but not enough that's significant enough to cause anyone to go into like a 911 type of a panic.
Yeah.
And I think the large part of that slowing the spread has really been all of the positivity that I've had. I've never been as passionate about what I do
Mhm.
at work as I am in this moment today. And I feel like it grows even a little bit every single day, which sounds really cheesy to say because I think I've said that earlier in my career and I was probably full of shit. But to now really believe that and experiencing that for myself,
Yeah.
it's been an extremely like almost magical thing to feel and experience. And I do tell people that on a pretty regular basis, especially the folks that I mentor from a cancer perspective, is really to try to find whatever bits of joy you can in your life and then try to expand on those. So if work is where you're getting a lot of the joy in your life, then figure out ways to, to let that joy at work grow and expand. And I think that's been something that I've been able to do here, whether it's been through pursuing the coaching education that I've pursued, the AI piece that you're talking about, just the ability to participate in different projects company wide and
Hmm.
stick your foot in a pool that maybe you've never stuck your foot in before. I've never really had those opportunities because I've always been strictly responsible for working with a client, understanding their brand and growing that client. And that's what I did all my life. This has been so different from that, but at the
Hmm.
same, still drawn on all of the experiences that I've had. It has been absolutely amazing. I tell every single person, quite honestly, people come to me and they say, "Oh my gosh, it sounds like things are going so great at work," it, and they are like, but it's amazing. But I do tell people all the time, like, whatever that thing is that you can find some joy in, try to invest more and let that joy spread as opposed to trying to move on to something else and finding joy there as well.
Hmm.
Pick where you've already got that, expand it, let it grow. Eventually that's going to like bulk off, it'll break off into something else and you can then pursue this new piece of joy or excitement. And that I
100%.
think is what Gail has really done a great job of doing for me.
One of the things I think you've
Oh,
done really well when it comes to your growth, change in general is uncomfortable. You kind of lean into that because like growth is a type of change and it is going to be uncomfortable, but you never let that stop you because the growth you've shown over the past 2 years is monumental. And it's because you never really stop to be like, ooh, this is uncomfortable for me. I'm going to pull back. You just keep going and you pick something new and you build.
yep. And that is I think that is a great source of motivation. It's a great source of energy in general. And all of that momentum, whether it's just fueling me or It fuels the people that I work with, or collectively, if we're working on a project, people pick up that a little bit of that energy level. I think that is something that I can hopefully continue to bring for other people. I hope that my energy well doesn't dry up anytime soon, but I want to continue, functioning like that. We're getting close to
Okay.
the end of our time, Kevin, and I would be remiss if I did not share with you the message that I wrote that actually sparked this entire podcast.
Okay.
So I don't know if I had shared this with you before, but really over the course of the last year, I have written letters to roughly like 55 people that have played a role in my life and been impactful, and you are no different. And before I determined that this was going to be a podcast, I was trying to decide, well, when's the best time to send this letter? Do I address the letters and then I let Anthony send them after I'm no longer here? Or do I actually give it to this person before and let them absorb it while I'm in their presence? And it has now come full circle to where I'm sharing it with you in this method. So
Oh, wow.
I'm going to read the letter that I wrote to you, and then I'll give you a second or two after that to respond, and we'll add some final thoughts and we'll wrap up.
Sure.
All right. Kevin, I don't think I've ever had a leader invest in me the way that you have. From our first meeting as coach and new G, you've been an incredible support at work. I couldn't have imagined then that just a year later, I would be lucky enough to join your team and that the journey we'd go on together would fundamentally change me. You have taught me, you have guided me, and you've given me the space to learn in ways that I never thought would be possible at work. That first year on your team, you carved out time from your schedule to take me through a university level class on industrial and organizational psychology. I had never even read a textbook before, and I read that one cover to cover, marking it up, absorbing every lesson. That investment of your time and knowledge was priceless. But your leadership has gone far beyond just skills and learning. Through more than 3 years of chemo, you've always led with compassion. You've given me the flexibility to care for myself, the encouragement to keep going, and the empowerment to do what I feel has been the most meaningful work of my life. I have no words to fully capture the love, respect, and admiration that I have for you. But please know this: you have restored my confidence, you've inspired my growth, and shown me what leadership at its very best looks like. And I will carry these lessons with me forever and be sure that I share them with my children. So thank you, Kevin, for all of that.
How do people keep it together? Do they?
Some people have, and some people haven't.
That's very sweet.
Ooh. And you don't have to feel like you have to respond to that, because I have something for you to respond to post that if you
Okay.
want to move on. I
Uh,
would love, go ahead, go ahead.
Please, you.
I was going to say, I would love to, as you kind of replay this conversation in your head, if there's anything that we haven't shared that you think that anybody listening might want to hear, or even an encouragement that you might have for the folks that are listening.
Oh, gosh. When I think about your journey on this team, again, I can't under the importance that you play on your own growth and your motivation was so key to it. I think having a supportive place where people we come from a coaching background, pretty much everybody on our team. So to create a collaborative place where people can explore that. If anybody is going through a transition, they're trying to figure out what their passion is, what they're excited about, what they're motivated to do. I think that kind of a space, that coaching space, can really help people figure out what that looks like. And then once that's identified, putting the work in, not being afraid of the uncomfortable. You're a model through this, Kris, because like you identified what it is you want, and that's constantly changing, and you're constantly setting the bar further, which I applaud. You have the motivation to figure that out. You're not afraid to try and get feedback. If anything, that feels like you seek it out to an extreme degree, and you found so much success. And success is, in this case, doesn't necessarily mean like you have achieved a lot, but it's fun to achieve a lot when you are happy, excited, motivated, surrounded by good people. You mentioned your energy, and that is something that is huge because you're such a positive person. Like it is easy to work with you, and that's the kind of approach that I think makes it like so worthwhile and impactful.
Love that. I think that is a perfect note to end on. And I think my last message for anyone listening today is just a nod to the leaders that are out there. I think, Kevin, you're a perfect example of the most powerful leaders. They never really lead from this place up front, right? They are walking beside you, they are investing in you. And I mean, in some cases, they believe in you even before you can believe in yourself. And I think those are the types of leaders that I definitely know I want to work for. I'm thankful that I work for one like that now. And it's exactly the type of leader that I aspire to be. And by no means do I think I have, reached that occasion, but I am definitely striving for that. And I think, my leadership and who I am kind of grows a little bit every day. And I hope that continues for as long as I have the capability to acquire new knowledge and put that into work for me. But I definitely thank you, Kevin, for spending the last half hour or so with us. I think that this is a great, great episode for people both in and outside of the workplace. Some of the messages that we've talked about regarding relationship building and just really showing up for yourself first and foremost, but then being lucky enough to have a crew of people that also show up for you makes us lucky people and something to be very thankful for. And that is where we're going to end for today. Folks, if you have been hanging on to a message to share with someone, I always like to highlight that you have this moment right now. You can push stop on the podcast, turn that window off, put it away, turn off your computer, grab your phone and make that phone call, FaceTime someone, text them, get on the phone with them today. There is no other moment that we're guaranteed besides the one we have right now. And you too can make this conversation happen with everyone in your lives. So until we meet again next week, I'm your host, Kris Saim, and this has been another episode of Dying Out Loud.